Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're not going to have Rip with us, sadly. There's a telephone pole that got knocked down right down the road from his house about 30 minutes ago, and he's not going to have internet or electricity for quite some time. So tonight, you're going to have just me and Mandy talking about the American Bresse Part Two. Hang on just a second. All right. So, Mandy, last week we talked a whole lot about the American Bresse. And you were telling us about breeding and looking for table traits and ruthless culling. And we talked about all kinds of stuff.
A lot. And I rewatched it to kind of get a feel for where we were.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what's missing? What do we miss? And it really boils down to start with what you have, like our favorite book.
Yep.
And go from there and let the birds tell you what they need. Like if you process a pile of cockerels, look at what could be different, what could be better. And once you have that first harvest and those results are your guide, they tell you what your next steps are. If you weren't happy with the fleshing, you got to work on that fleshing. Just pick your number one thing that could be better, and that's your focus for the following season.
Yeah, I think for me, whether it's a dual purpose bird for the farm and the family or a show bird, the first most important thing that you need to do as a breeder is write down what your goals are. To me, you got to know where the light is at the end of the tunnel. And to me, that's extremely important. That's one of the things. Every time I would ask Rip a question, his first answer was always, well, what are your goals?
Yeah, they matter.
And I was like, well, we got to figure out the goals first. And so he taught me that, and it over time it got to where it was more important. You know, I could figure it out. So that's a huge thing, is know your goals, know what you want. Like, you know, for the American Bresse, a lot of it is table traits, meat and eggs, taking care of your family, providing for your family with a real bird, not something that's a science lab blend of 30 plus different sets of genetics.
Yeah, because that can get complicated to clean up. And part of what I've been learning this year is when you're doing the breeding, it's so much more than just hatching eggs. Like, it's easy to get an incubator, put some eggs in it, hatch some chicks. You're going to have some chicks. But
that's easy.
Yeah, that's easy. But figuring out which bird to be paired with another bird and the reasons why. I do appreciate the hatch and see approach because it's where I've learned the most, where I put the birds together and I hatch and I look at them and I go, well, that really worked. Or no, that didn't work. That was a whole lot of dinner.
Yeah. You know, when you're doing that, you will wind up with a whole lot of dinner. But I think personally,
that's half my goal right there.
I was going to say that's half the goal for one with a dual purpose bird, and for two, I think it's important to learn a lot of lessons the hard way.
They stick better.
They do stick better. And there's a couple of things while I've been learning from Rip that he just kind of, you know, I've asked him, Rip, why didn't you tell me that a year ago? And he said,
you weren't ready yet.
That's exactly what he said. You weren't ready yet. And, you know, I was like, well, and I understood exactly what he meant and why he said it. And I think that part of that is here. Part of that is what made me who I am as a breeder and as a poultry person, is learning those lessons the hard way and learning what to do. Like for you with the Bresse, You know, you want to see a bird lay more than 5 eggs a week.
5 or 6.
Yeah, 5, 6.
I learned a lot of what I didn't want for a
Yeah.
flock cull, and I've had a lot of birds where, you know, I love the temperament. The temperament was spot on. They were little golden retrievers, but then when I went to check nest boxes, it looked like a lot of them were only doing 3 or 4 eggs a week, and I was like, I know chickens are capable of more than that. I know it. I've had those birds. They did more, but maybe I wasn't so crazy about that temperament. And then making that switch over to the dual purpose, I'm adding a whole other category
Yeah.
to what the birds have to bring. Because once you start checking down that checklist of, are they healthy? Do they have really good vigor? Is the fertility there to where those eggs will hatch real good? Do they have the rate of lay? Do they have the laying persistence? Do they look accurate for their breed? And then I'm asking them to go to the freezer in a reasonable amount of time too. That's a lot of pressure to put on a bird.
I mean, they got to perform or they got to get out.
Right. So that's where the ruthless culling come into play, because not every individual of a flock is going to perform like their peers. And the sooner I can find those birds and remove them from the flock, the better.
So I have a question. How long have you been working with the American Bresse? Isn't it like 9, 10 years, something like that?
I wish I'd be a little step closer than I am, but I have 7 generations under my belt, and I've had them for 8 years. And I got started on the breeding immediately, and I can only appreciate the prior knowledge I had that much more.
Okay.
With what I knew going into it, there was a lot that clicked into place as I went through it with another breed.
So tell me this, as far as it relates to selection, what you want as far as table traits, how many eggs they lay and all that stuff, what would Mandy now go back and tell Mandy 8 years ago, hey, you need to look for this, you need to call for this, you need to do this? What would you say to yourself 8 years ago?
Start pair hatching immediately so you know exactly where everything came from. When you're looking at those results out of the group that you hatched, who's the mom and who's the dad? Because when you start doing clan mating, you can't track it. You have no idea the contributing genetics besides who's in that pen. And if I was going to do anything over again, I'd be pair hatching, because I would know, I would have so many more answers from an earlier position before it got much further. Like, I would have been able to backtrack and call out birds that weren't doing me breeding favors. And if you're in a clan environment with your breeding, you don't know what's contributing fully. So, like, let's say you break down your hatch results into a matter of percentages, and 25% of them just didn't get that meeting. They just didn't. So, of the 25%, which hens did they come from? If you know you put the eggs in the incubator from, let's say, 10 different hens, and yet 25% didn't get that meeting, well, don't you want to know who the specific parents are now to see if you can get a better percentage next time by only hatching from those with the meatiest results or the better growing results? And the same thing when they come into active lay. How many of those pullets start laying exactly when they're expected to? For the American Bresse, I like to see them start laying at 18, 20 weeks old.
Yeah.
A little later is better than too soon, because too soon they're not going to make weight, chances are. And once they start laying, growth stops. So I'm looking for pullets to be a minimum of 5 pounds when they have their first egg. And if they don't make weight because they started laying too soon and they're just going to be a small bird, then I can go ahead and remove them from the gene pool and keep those ones that are doing the expectations.
Right. Okay, so you want to see them laying at 18 to 20 weeks.
And and be a minimum of 5 pounds if they start that early.
You want them to be 5 pounds. Okay. All right.
Because they have another 6 months and some change to make weight for the adult standard. And the females are supposed to be between 5 and 6.5 pounds. And once that laying begins, they'll be hard pressed to put on that extra pound and a half and have it actually be substance and not just fat.
Yeah. That is important. What about for the roosters? What do you look for those?
My internet. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh. It's hard to tell when my internet's working or not. Where was I?
We were talking about the traits that you look for in a rooster.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So the males, because they are what we eat from the most, I really monitor their growth rate a lot closer than the females, and I'll track their weights from when they hatch all the way through 8 weeks at least. And that growth rate becomes apparent because you look at the gain percentage over the week prior, and you can find who was putting on 30% more over their prior weight, who's putting on 50%. I've seen some birds outright fully double their weight in a week, but then he might not do that much 2 weeks later.
Yeah. So I've seen that too. When I had some American Bresse that I was trying out a feed recipe that Jeff had created, and I was weighing them every week. You know, I had chicks that were less than 2 months old, and I would see them double their weight in a week. And then, you know, they may double twice in a row, and then the next time they may not gain a whole lot. But that type of rapid growth to me is just, it's crazy to think of.
Yeah.
But it happens. Uh-oh, I think we lost her altogether. Her internet maybe it rebooted. So what we were talking about is the American Bresse, and she was telling us about how some of the stuff that she looks for is she wants to see her hens at a point of lay around 18 to 20 weeks. And she wants those birds to weigh about 5 pounds. And then we started talking about the males and what she was looking for in those. And, you know, hopefully she'll be able to get back on pretty quickly. I think we may have her.
I think I'm back. Am I back?
I see you. Your video is not moving around a whole lot, but I can hear you.
Okay. Now, where did I leave off with those cockerels? So the growth rate, when you see those big swings and then nothing much from them, they develop sort of an unpredictable growth swing that continues, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly where they're going to reach to and what they're going to achieve. So I prefer to see a bird that matures steadily and falling somewhere within that category of 30 to 50% over the last weigh-in for the week before.
I was going to say, when you have a bird that doubles its weight and doubles its weight or doubles its weight in 1 week and doesn't do
frozen, or if you're the one frozen?
I think you're frozen. Nope, I see you're moving. Rob says that the sound quality has been off on Mandy's end, and it's a little bit robotic. So with the male birds, when you have them that double like that and then they don't grow, would that be one that you would put in the rooster camp to get rid of later?
Yeah, that bird would earn freezer status.
Okay, I was thinking that would be a trait that you did not want in your breeder pen, because you want steady growth, not sporadic growth.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else for us?
A lot, but I don't know if I can trust my internet.
Well, we'll give it a shot.
So for the pullets, they tend to grow a little steadily. And now I'm at the point where I feel really confident labeling the bottom 25% as calls because they can keep up and grow with their peers.
Right.
And I'm willing to bet that when I start pair hatching, it's going to become apparent that they're probably sisters. And there's probably a hen or two that just aren't producing the growth I want to see. Because sometimes you do have that happen where birds do everything fantastic. And you're like, I'm so excited. I'm putting this bird in the breeding pen. And then you do that and they don't pass forward what they did. And it's hard to understand why that may be. And you have to potentially try a different male to see if it was him or her. And once a female has been through 2 or 3 different male choices, are her results still the same? Like she's just not going to be able to replicate herself again, because those good growing, strong producing hens, like you need them to breed forward. And if they don't, find another one that will. And by monitoring your growth results and learning how your genetics are passing forward, that's where everything starts to click in and make sense. Where you get great results, can they be repeated? If they can be repeated, now you're onto something. If the results cannot be repeated and it kind of stops with the bird you were breeding, then that answers the question of keep or call. And it feels like the way I run my flock is very much keep or call, just through all the different ages, all of my different pens. I'm always looking at, is it time for this bird to go to the freezer and replace it with a better offspring? Because I'm making the offspring. I have the better birds to backfill if someone just isn't able to keep up. Looks like Carrie's taking a phone call. Do we have some more group questions? Did Mandy ever cross in other lines into her birds? Yes, I did do some experimental breeding. Not sure how to highlight comments on this, but I have a pen of my original flock. Everything else is a genetic experiment with outside genetics, because the gene pool initially of the American Bresse, it's pretty small from the initial offerings, but it's from 3 separate lines. So I made sure to source birds from all 3 lines with varying degrees of success. And then looking at their express traits and looking for the birds that were the total package, no matter which line they came from. And I'm seeing a lot of variation from one group to another, which makes it exciting because I don't know everything that's in the genetics. I still have another couple generations to go in some of my pens to see what's possible. I've already gotten them too big, and that was a mistake. Chasing size was absolutely a mistake because it changed the growth rate, and they started to favor that growth method of bone first and meat later. And that's not what I wanted, because the sooner I can make my culling decisions for the freezer, the sooner I have more available pen space, the sooner we get to eat. And I'm looking for some semblance of speed. If I was a more patient person, there's a lot of other birds that would fit what we need. But the when is where I keep getting hung up, which makes it fun. A fun little list of check boxes that I have to go through with every hatch batch that I do. So if I do 50 chicks a month in my own hatching, I have to consider the pen space they're going to need to get all the way to 14, 15, 16 weeks. And I have to make sure I have space available for the next ones coming up. And by doing that, it's almost like a schedule. I should probably write down the schedule and show the numbers that we're doing. And how many hatches do you do in a year? Oh gosh, Sue. I aim for 50 a month, whether that's 1 hatch or 2 hatch varies. And I hatch at least 7 months out of the year. I try to take the winter off, and I don't think I'm going to get this winter off. But my schedule and accommodating where everyone's going to grow, because you have to have really good space. Like, you can't cramp and crowd them and expect good results. They have to feel free and get away from each other every once in a while. Like, I'm watching some cockerels grow out now, and now they're, 9-10 weeks old. And I've just been opening the door and turning them loose. Wherever they end up is where they end up, because the field they normally use is occupied. So I've just been running them out the front door, and sometimes they're at the fire pit hanging out with me. And when those young cockerels are sparring with each other, they're playing. Like, they play so much. I didn't know they played that much, but because it's out the front where I see them in our hangout areas, I get to compare demeanor. I get to compare, like, I can rule out half of what's in my rooster coop right now as a breeding bird, because they're not ranging like the others. They don't do what chickens are supposed to do. So I know everyone who walks outside and sits down and stays there is not a breeding bird for me. I'm looking at the guys who take off, they shoot 30 feet out, they immediately start eating, they immediately start browsing around, they immediately start sparring with each other and playing games. Those are the ones I'm now interested in. All the lazy birds, I've already made a decision, because they're just not performing the way I want these birds to perform.
Right.
So by monitoring everything about them, they tell you, if you're listening, they tell you who's a keeper and who's not.
Well, and that's one of the things Jeff talks about, and he preaches about getting your bucket. Take your bucket out to your yard and just sit there and watch them. See what they're doing.
The birds tell you exactly what they're up to.
Sue wants to know, how often should you or are you putting your hands on your birds?
Bare minimum is every 2 weeks.
Okay.
It lets me know if someone's getting ready to lean out in favor of that skeletal kind of growth, especially at 7, 8, 9 weeks old. If they're going to lean out, it's right about them. Then up through about 12 weeks old. And I'm most interested in finding the birds who stay meaty for the duration of growth. They never have a lean day. And part of that's going to be feed, part of that's going to be environment, part of that's going to be competition, and a part of that's going to be genetic.
Yeah, that's true. Evelyn says, can you share the feed recipe that Fertility put together for you, please? Evelyn, that recipe should be in the files section of this group. If it is not, I know 100% that it is in the files section for the American Bresse Facebook group.
In the breed club specifically.
Yeah, in the breed club specifically, there is one Jeff put together specifically for the American Bresse. And I can tell you that that feed works amazing.
Dude, no. Like, by 3 weeks old, you can pick up chicks, and there's a significant chunk factor going on there. Like, if you've been doing like just a regular crumble starter feed, just try the other starter recipe. Feed those birds side by side and look at them at 3 weeks old.
You won't recognize the difference. I had some birds hatch out about 3 weeks ago now outside. I go out there a couple months ago and I see one of my hens had gone broody. I'm like, what are you doing laying there? I mean, it's 100 degrees that day. I thought the worst instantly, because, they're not typically very broody. And
they're technically not supposed to be broody.
I got her out of I got her out of the way, and there's like a bunch of eggs right there. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I just let it go. I'm like, well, let's see how you are, because you've been paired with this one rooster this whole time. So we're going to see what happens. And they are in a fly pen. Just these two birds, 4 foot wide, 8 foot deep, 8 foot tall. And I have a roost bar at 3 feet, which is high, especially for large fowl. And I have another roost bar that is 6 feet high, which is extremely high for a large fowl. At 2 weeks, I go down there one night. I'm checking on these birds. And I'm like, oh, crap, where's these birds at? And I'm looking around. I hear them. I got my light. I'm looking all over the ground. Nothing. I hear the hen give me that, what the crap are you doing out here tonight noise. I look up and I see Mama, a baby
in a whole
under
little
her.
row.
Like one of them was right under her, a little row of chicks, and then Daddy. And I'm
He
like,
was probably pretty proud.
I'm like, y'all are 2 weeks old and you're 6 feet off the ground. How? I took a picture and I sent it to Jeff. And I said, Jeff, what the crap? And he said, are you feeding them the feed that I told you? I said, yes, I order it by the ton. He goes, there's your problem. I said, I've hatched out a lot of chicks. This ain't never happened. He said, well, I mean, they don't usually go broody either, so she's probably a keeper.
Yeah, if she can start teaching them that young. That's what I like about this. Well, my other shoulder. That one. That rooster right there. That guy's a rock star. I love that bird. He puts down fleshing growth rate in a compact size. He takes care of the hens really well. I'll let him walk over to another pen and take care of those girls too. And he's A-okay sharing a couple different pens, and I'll leave him with a group of females for about like 3-4 days and then walk him back to another pen. He seems to really appreciate that. And then I grouped my females together based on how similar they are to each other. Like kinds with like kinds. I tried that this year. So I'm still going to pair hatch. I have to. Even though that bird produces really good results, I still need to figure out which hens are not helping him. And based on hatch percentages, I'm willing to bet there's at least 2 he doesn't need to be around anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, like, you know, what rooster's going to mind going from pen to pen to pen?
Couple of them do. Couple of them are flock sour. They're like, no, I'm not leaving my girls. These are mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, yeah, but I'm trying to give you more.
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
I already have a pen. I want the boy that learns to greet me at the door and go, am I changing pens today? Yes,
you know,
you are.
I hear people talk about how they have their pens set up, and you know they'll move one from pen to pen to pen, and yeah, like when they see you coming out there, they know what you're doing, and they hop down off that roost and they come over to the door. And like some of them, these boys, you can open the door, they'll go to the next one, and they'll stand there and wait.
No, they walk themselves into that other pen. I don't pick them up. I open one door, shut it, walk them down where I want them, open the other door. And if they're not willing to figure that out, then I'm like, okay, well, your vigor's not where I need it to be. And then I put a new one in there.
Now, Sue has a loaded question right here. How many hatches a year? How many hatches do you do? And
well, I talked about that while you were gone with some technical difficulties.
How many birds are in those hatches?
I aim for 50 a month, whether that's 2 or 3. It depends. Okay. And then I hatch at least 7 months out of the year. because I have to be cognizant of when we can process. And it's terrible to be out there processing birds in January and February, and it's terrible. It's cold. It's not heated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Sue says that she wants to thank you for the idea of pair hatching. She plans on doing that with her Krebs and her Reds this fall.
I think everybody should do it because it answers so many questions that you don't even know you had yet. But once those chicks are all jumbled together, you're not answering any question. You can only do bulk percentages at best.
Yep, you're right. And I'm also a huge fan of wing banding. If you're going to go to the trouble of pair hatching, you label those eggs when you put them in your incubator based on the pen that they came out of. And then when you put them in separate containers, however you do it in your hatcher, I'm a huge fan of keeping them separate and wing banding them, within a week. And once you do that, write that number down, this wing band came from this dam, this sire, and you can watch it. And within the week, you'll know if it's going to be a wide body bird you want to keep or if it's going to be one you want to put in the freezer later. And that may be a decision factor for you to, if it's one you want to keep, put the wing band on it. You know where it came from. You can watch that bird grow. And you know that if you have one that doesn't have a wing band, that something straight out of the hatcher you didn't like, it didn't go with your breeding program, and then you can get rid of it. However you see fit later, you'll just know if it doesn't have a wing band, don't breed it forward.
Wing bands are surprisingly easy to install. Initially, I was daunted about it, but then I got the Jiffy Zip with the applicator tool. It's so easy, especially right about 5, 6, 7 days old.
Yeah, I got the first wing bands I got last year at the Ohio National. Karen had some that she was getting rid of, and I was like, "Ooh, I wanted to try this." And I brought them home, and I kept them for a while. And like you, I was hesitant, and I just knew I was fixing to kill a bird, and it was going to bleed all over the place, and I was going to make a huge mess.
No, there's no blood. No blood at all.
Like it's just like getting an ear pierced or something along those lines. It's crazy.
And it sticks on through processing. So if you're really collecting data for the duration of growth and you're going bird by bird, you can get all the way to prepping that bird for dinner and that wing band's still with it. If you have final notes on structure after you've cooked it, hopefully the wing band's off then. But you know exactly who it was when you got there.
Yeah, you'll know all the way up to that process, and you'll know.
Until you cut it off, it's going to be there. Because leg bands, I like the visibility of them. And you can do like a little color-coded system so you know who's who from afar. But once you process them, it's gone. As soon as you cut the feet off, there's no more band. But the wing band, it's still there.
It stays there as long as the wing does.
So if you're taking notes on fat composition and development and those finer points of structure notes after it's processed, you can still tie it to an individual bird if you're using the wing bands.
So Evelyn is asking, if you're not keeping your roux and hens housed together, how often do they need to breed to keep fertile eggs?
So if you pull the male away from the hens and you track your fertility, it can be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, all the way out. I've heard 3 months a hen can still be fertile. Mm-hmm. So if you plan on changing boys, it's really important to monitor those eggs and break them open and verify that they're infertile before you go and put the new boy in, because they can linger for quite a while. Now, for the sake of maximizing fertility, I like to see them. I like to confirm visually that he's in there active, and then based on that is if he's going to be there for 2 days, 3 days, and then bounce him back to the other pen he was in.
Mm-hmm. So you'd like to move around every couple of days?
Depending on which
just to
boy
make sure.
and which pen and what for. And
That's fair. Let's see. Here's another question. For tracking production, how does every like to do? How do you like to do that? Trap nesting for how long? Pen averages?
So I keep a pen average, and that way I can find out if I might have a slacker in that pen. And then if I need to find an individual bird within a pen, then I will use, it's not a trap nest system. It's not built into the pen. I have to physically remove the bird from the pen and then put her in like a little quarantine spot where I can see her series of eggs. Mm-hmm. So if I want a week's worth of collection from a particular hen, then she'll go and camp out for, 5-6 days. And that viewpoint lets me see her laying persistence, the shape and form of the egg, the size of the egg, the color of the egg. I can collect a lot about how she lays within that 6-day period that she's being held. And then put her back in with the choice male and collect again. And I can do a little rotation of sorts. But right now, I'm topped out at 4 females at a time that I can collect individually from until I build a new row of fancy cages, which will also double as finishing spaces.
Okay.
It's hard to give up space if you only get one use out of it, but I can see a need for special finishing space, quarantine space for capturing individual eggs. I think I need about, 10 wall-mounted cages with each other on an automated water system. It'd make my life easier.
I mean, it's the small things in life. And I think 10 cages that were, 2 foot by 2 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot?
I'd push it to 36. 36 by 36 or so. Like a good solid rabbit cage to where they have enough room to get up and move around and not being too cramped.
I mean, and for a bird, 3 foot's a lot. That's a good bit.
Yeah, for temporary, because it's not forever.
It's not permanent.
Yeah.
And let's see, Evelyn, you asked about feed. Send me a message. I know of a place in Middle Tennessee that, her question was, she didn't realize that it was in the files when we were talking about the recipe. I do know a place that's in Middle Tennessee that is working on getting set up to have those specific recipes at their location for pickup.
That's great news. I know a couple people down there who'd be interested.
It is in the works. I promise. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't see any others. Mandy, is there anything else that you can share with us about it?
About how good the feed is, or
this show's about the American Bresse right here.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I don't know what I would add other than I'm really happy that I fell in with these birds and they showed me everything a chicken can be. And they showed me the importance of breeding effort. Because if your birds were perfectly bred, do you ever know the effort that went into them? Do you ever know? Like, if it's so easy, you just hatch them?
There's no way.
There's no way to know. These birds put me through the ringer almost as bad as some other breeds did, but a little more in depth with a lot more utility behind them. So I had a good management plan in place because there was a couple years where we ate a lot of small, squirrely, narrow, like the meat was stringy, the texture was, I knew there could be better chicken.
Right.
Without having to get into the commercial hybrids, because the reason the commercial hybrids didn't work out for us, it was not for wants of meat. They put the meat on. They grew. They they have that stuff going for them,
Right.
but I couldn't hatch them. I can't breed that at
Yeah.
home. I have to keep buying new ones. And what happens if you have a favorite and it's destined to be in the freezer? Like, it can't live a normal life.
Right.
What if it's a favorite and you want to? Well, I've heard that story a lot. Well, it got to be about 6 months old or so before it fell over dead.
So let's say that somebody wanted to get started with American Bresse. Would it be fair to say that they should start with maybe a trio, some started pullets and cockerels?
Ideally, because you can
Chicks.
see more about the bird. If the bird's in front of you grown, you can kind of look at it and put your hands on it and go, yeah, this looks right.
So find a solid trio.
Yeah, because that way you can see. And hopefully you've been learning and building on your knowledge base so that when birds are in front of you, you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at.
Okay. And then from that, you would just probably start hatching every single thing you can.
Until you're full, until like you have to be cognizant of what you're putting in the incubator. You need to know that all needs a responsible place where it can go when they hatch.
Let's see here. Here's one question. Did you cover this one earlier? Do you have a separate feeder for rooster and for chickens or hens?
No. Everybody eats out of the same.
See, that's me. I feed everybody the same. And I have oyster shells and grit. I have a little 2-compartment. And I have that separate where the hens can get what they need. Let's see here. I think that is.
Well, Dawn was asking if anyone in Wisconsin can get the feed formula, and I haven't heard yet of anyone manufacturing it up there.
No, I don't know of anybody there, but I will say, you can download that formula out of the file section. And if you have a mill there that'll make it for you, and they can get the minerals and stuff from Fertility, they can make it, and you'll have it.
I was blown away by the difference in the growth. Like, I thought I was doing all right with feed, and then Jeff goes, "Well, try this."
Yeah. I mean, the birds they grow better. They have a better temperament. Their feathering is better. Satisfied. Yeah, they do. And a lot of people are like, well, that feed recipe is a little more expensive. Well, in my experience, they eat a lot less.
Yeah, sometimes it felt like it was 50% less, and I was really hopeful I could have had the time to follow through on my second round of the trial to really confirm that. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have to do it again and start the trial when my workload is not chaotic.
Well, I mean, for science, you'd be amazed at what people would do. All right. Well, we are going to cut tonight's episode a little bit short. And if anybody has any questions, make sure to post it up in the Poultry Keepers 360 group. Let tag whoever if the question is specific to somebody. If not, somebody will respond and help you out. If you can't find that recipe, let us know. And we'll find it and we'll share it with you or tag you in it or send it straight to you. Y'all have a good night.